My name is William Maroney, and this is my Data Exam 3 report. Um, so during this experiment, we were essentially giving people either a hot drink, a cold drink, or no drink at all, subtly, and then having them answer a survey afterwards. And these people aren't supposed to know that the drink has any correlation to the survey, um, but that's the gist of the experiment. And so, in analyzing this experiment, I chose to analyze the hot and cold beverage groups. So, individuals who held a hot beverage before they responded versus those who held a cold beverage. And the specific piece of data I wanted to analyze was their mean response value on, I want to say it was the last question, but it's the question pertaining to, is this person good natured or bad natured? And 0 is completely bad natured and 10 is completely good natured. So I conducted this test by doing a 2-sample hypothesis test for means. And I took the data from the first 124 responses from each group. And the reason I say first 124 is because there was more responses for the cold group than hot. So in order to preserve the sample size, I took the first 124 from the cold group and the full 124 from the hot group. And yeah, so my null hypothesis for this test was HO equals 0, and my alternative hypothesis was that H1 does not equal 0. So I'm essentially analyzing to see if I can find statistically significant evidence that there is a difference in the true mean response value for this question between the two groups. So my conclusion on this test, my analysis gave me a confidence interval of -1.123 to -0.0544, as well as a p-value of 0.0309. And since this p-value is lower than our alpha of 0.05, because we're using a 95% confidence interval, but since that p-value is lower than the alpha, I did find statistically significant evidence to reject my null hypothesis, which means that I'm accepting my alternative hypothesis, which states that there is in fact a significant difference between the true mean response value for the two groups. And so my final conclusion would be that we can say we are 95% confident that the true mean response value to this question differs by between 1.123 and 0.0544 points when comparing the respondents who held a cold drink first to those who held a hot one first. And additionally, in this situation, because my confidence interval is negative, we can determine that this essentially means the true mean response value from group 1, which in this case is my cold drink group, is actually less than the true mean response value of group 2 by somewhere between those values. And this can actually be proved further, and I did do this, but you can conduct an additional test using all the same values, the same null hypothesis, but instead of an alternative hypothesis of does not equal 0, you have an alternative hypothesis of less than 0. So H1 is less than 0. And so this test produces a p-value of 0.0155, which is also less than 0.05, of course, which allows us to reject that null hypothesis and accept the alternative that the true mean response value of group 1, cold drink group, is in fact lower than the true mean response value of group 2, hot drink group. So why is this significant? So in the context of that particular question, 0 was all the way bad-natured and 10 was all the way good-natured. So essentially what I found here is that the group who held the hot drink first, their true mean response value found that individual in the survey to be more good-natured, whereas those who held the cold drink first, their true mean response value found the individual to be more bad-natured. And I find this really interesting because when we first started this project, we discussed it really briefly in class, but it was mentioned how there's previous observations and some of the previous studies we looked at as examples had mentioned a correlation between either interacting with or holding or being around some sort of warm object or item or drink, whatever, and then giving more empathetic or selfless, kind of generous responses when compared to those who didn't hold or interact with a warm object or who held or interacted with a cold object. And I find this interesting because what I found in my test 100% supports that observation. I essentially found that people who held the hot drink found this person more good-natured, and people who held the cold drink found them more bad-natured. I just think that's interesting, and it is statistically significant, so there's some sort of substance to it, and I think without a doubt this proves that there is some sort of correlation between... Sorry about that, my camera died on me, but I was in the middle of saying that this without a doubt proves to me that there's a correlation between the responses that were given on the survey and whether that person held a cold drink or a hot drink beforehand. And like I said, I definitely think it agrees with the observation about those who interact with warm things might give more generous or selfless responses, but at the very base level, it proves that there is a statistically significant difference in the responses given by people who are holding the cold drink versus those who are holding the hot drink. And I think that alone is interesting. I mean, it's interesting to me how something that little, just holding a drink that's hot or cold for 20 seconds unknowingly, like something that subtle can have a profound psychological effect and clearly, skew our responses one way or another. And even if it's not a significant skew, the fact that I was able to find statistically significant data that represented that difference is meaningful to me, and I find it interesting. So, yeah, that's my report, and that's my hypothesis test. Thank you.